Did you know that there is a course called Women Who Lead where you get to spend hours with me learning how to make every interaction safe, logical, fun, and memorable? Doesn't that sound like a great way to spend some time? It will put tools in your tool belt that will change your trajectory. Give it a shot. Go to www.aimwithus.com and click on courses. I can't wait to see you there.
Welcome to Productive Joy with Dr. Christie, where fun meets action.
Hi, friends. Welcome to Productive Joy. Oh, my goodness, are we in for a treat today? I have a new friend with me. Dr. Ron Anbar is here with us today. But before I introduce him, I need your help. If you have not already followed this podcast, I need you to do it. If you have, I need you to rate it, because those are the ways that brilliant people like Dr. Anbar get into the hands of all of our listeners. But if you're not following and you're not subscribed and you're not knowing that these people exist, then you don't get to hear them, and that's sad. So do me that favor and recognize that we all need a little more productive joy in our lives, and this is how you get it. So I have a new friend with me. I already introduced him, but I'm going to introduce him again. So Dr. Ron Anbar is an expert in a lot of things. So he's a pediatric lung doctor by trade, but he spent the last 10 years as a counselor. He's a writer. He loves to write stories. He's an expert in anxiety and relationships and sleep and tough decisions, and he specifically does that for teens. But he loves his work so much that he chooses to work 6 days a week, 12-hour days, and he's not exhausted at the end of it. So Dr. Anbar, welcome to Productive Joy.
Thank you so very much.
Are you ready to have some fun?
I am. I'm going to tell you that if you do your passion, you never work a day in your life, as you know.
I do know that. And I am living the dream over here for sure. So speaking of, people are funny and they really decide in the first minute and a half whether or not they're going to listen. And so if you had to convince us that the next 30 minutes is going to be worth our time, what would you say to convince the listeners to keep listening?
Each one of us has the power inside of us to overcome most of our challenges. Half of America has chronic disease, and you can improve your disease with your mind, with reaching into your inner power. You don't have to be suffering from the illness physically. You don't have to wait for the doctors to fix you. You can fix it yourself. And if you don't have an illness, maybe you want to excel in sports or in school, and you have the power inside of you to do that as well. So that's what my book is about, and that's what I'd like to talk to you about today.
Oh my gosh, we're going to have so much fun. Okay, so let's back up to little Dr. Anbar. You don't have to go all the way back unless you want to, but most people would have considered being a pediatric lung doctor an accomplishment that you don't continue and go back and do more, right? But you did that. And then you said, no, wait, actually, I really want to counsel people and I want to do more. So why don't you take us through that journey? Tell us, you go back as far as you want and tell us the origin to now. How did you get here?
Well, as I tell my patients, the average person changes career 5 times in their lifetime. And I sort of did that within medicine. So I started out as a pediatric pulmonologist. When I was 16 years old, I volunteered at a children's hospital of Stanford and made friends with some kids with cystic fibrosis. That's a disease you're born with. And back in the 70s, when I first encountered it, people living into their late teens only. And now, because of great therapies, people living into the 60s and 70s, things have really changed. And I went into pulmonology. I wanted to find a cure for cystic fibrosis. That was my first dream. And so I was going to do research, but I found out that to find a cure, to make a big headway, you have to do 24/7 research. And I didn't like that. I love patients. So I shifted gears and became a director of a cystic fibrosis center and took care of kids with cystic fibrosis as well as other lung problems. And then about 15 years into my career, I ran into a patient named Paul who had very bad milk allergies and almost died on a couple of occasions from eating a milk product. And he told me, when I smelled cheeseburgers, I developed asthma attacks. I thought it was rather weird. I said to him, can you imagine eating a cheeseburger, which is something he could not do in real life? He closed his eyes, and within seconds, he was having significant trouble breathing, so much so I thought he might stop breathing. I said, stop it.
Oh my goodness.
And he did. And I said, you're kidding me. No, I couldn't breathe. That was my asthma, he said. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, you can think your way into illness? And if you could do that, can you think your way out? That was my rather dramatic introduction to the world of the mind and of imagination and hypnosis. Just to clarify, hypnosis is using your imagination to help yourself. It's not mind control. It's not sleep. It's not unusual, but that's what it means. So I worked with him for a good year. He was my only patient under the supervision of my psychiatrist in upstate New York in Syracuse. And it worked so well, I started offering it to other kids with lung problems, with cough and shortness of breath and chest pain. And then it worked so well, I'm a pediatrician, so I started offering it for other kids with stomach aches and headaches and anxiety and bedwetting and hair pulling and other kinds of habits. It works really, really well. In fact, after doing this for a couple of years, I found out that about 85% of my patients got better. And when I
Wow.
looked at the 15% who didn't get better, what was common about them is they weren't sure they wanted to learn how to do this.
Mm.
Because the power of hypnosis is in you. Okay. It's an inner power. And so if you're not interested, nothing happens. On the other hand, if you are interested, you will get better. Sometimes you'll get a little better, and many times you'll get a lot better, but you will improve because we all have a way of accessing ourselves in a better way. So that's how I got into hypnosis. And 10 years ago, my wife got tired of living in central New York, something about the weather. So I moved to sunny La Jolla, California, where I live now. And I decided to recast my career. And instead of doing half-time lung doctor and half-time counseling, I did this full-time. And this brings to today, although my next career is that I'm writing books now. We're going to talk about my second book, The Life Guide for Teens. My first book tells the story I just told you, the changing children's lives with hypnosis. And I can tell you I'm already working on the third book. So this is my next phase. I've always liked to write. Now I get to write books.
Well, and I was going to say, you started with, when I asked you what you were, you said a writer, and that is by nature just, I love that you are sharing this in a way that people can get to you without having to get to you. Because I'm going to guess that it is difficult to get in to see you because you are so busy, because so many people need what you have. So let's back up. I am so impressed by you for so many different reasons already. It is clear that you want kids to get better, whatever that looks like, and that you really, in turn, want humans to get better. You want people to be able to solve their own problems. And you mentioned that hypnosis really is just controlling your mind. I've had a lot of really cool guests lately that have talked about the importance of your body and your mind and how the two work together. I actually am listening to a podcast right now with a brain researcher talking about the control that you have. So you said 85% got it and were healed, essentially. We're able to get better. And the 15% that didn't really weren't willing to give it a shot. What do you think is different about those two groups that would cause somebody to stay in sickness instead of choosing to get better?
Great question. So with kids, you're dealing with parents who bring the child in, and the child may not think they have a problem, or they just don't have the perspective to realize they should fix something in themselves.
Hmm.
For example, the kids who play video games 8 hours a day, that's not good. Or on social
No.
media, 12 hours a day, that's not good. But young teens can't understand that. You can tell them why it's not good, and we can talk about that if you like, but they don't want to hear it. So they'll just keep playing the video games. So if they want help because they find out they can't let go of the video games or the social media, hypnosis can help. But if they don't want help, you're in control of yourself.
Mm. So I guess what I really heard there is that you have to acknowledge that there's a problem and that there's something worth fixing. And maybe it's the influence of the parents who kind of said, oh, well, we're going to go to this, hokey thing that we don't know, right? Like we say things that we don't think the kids are listening to, but they absolutely are. And I think that just flashes forward to the adults in the equation and how closed-minded we can be to heal ourselves. I know you specialize in the littles, and I say the littles, children, but really that translates into everybody that's listening right now, right? Like, so this podcast is really geared for leaders who want to create a little more productive joy in their space, whatever that space might be. And so if I were listening right now, I am listening right now, I'm hearing, well, Christie, get out of your own way, right? Believe that you can do better and be better just by controlling your mind a little bit. So what does a session with you look like? Like how do you get us to that point? Because we're going to talk about what the book can do for us. But if I were sitting across from you in a doctor's office, what might that look like?
Well, the first thing is to understand the power of your words. What you say to yourself is what your brain hears is what happens. So if you say to yourself, I can't do this, brain says, yep, can't do it. And if you say to yourself, I can do this, or I want to do this, brain is saying, okay, how did I get there?
Mm.
So we program ourselves. So if we're negative, we mess up when we say, oh, you're stupid, I'm stupid, and you believe it, then you become not so smart. If on the
Mm.
other hand, you say, I want to become smarter, then you can become smarter because your brain will be open to that. And by the way, you talked about parents, how parents talk to their kids. As you said, the kids listen. So if a kid is not doing their homework and a parent says, you lazy bum, the kid hears, I'm a lazy bum, and then becomes lazy. If the parent said, I know you can do better, you can really help yourself, the child will hear that and do that. So I teach parents to talk positively to their children. I teach bosses to talk positively to their employees, and I teach people to talk positively to themselves. And I also teach one other thing, and that is if somebody gives you negative input, you can block it.
Mm. Say
Somebody
more.
says you're, if somebody says you're stupid, you don't have to say okay. You can say I'm. You can say I'm smart if you believe that, or I want to be smarter. And in so doing, you're blocking them and not letting them affect you. What I'm telling you is nothing new. Henry Ford, car manufacturer, 100 years ago said, whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right.
Yeah.
Because what you say is what happens. The Buddha said 2,700 years ago, he said, what we think is what we become.
Mm.
And that's what we're talking about. So that's a simple way of helping yourself.
Well, it's simple, but simple doesn't mean easy, right? So I think we frequently listen to that inner voice, even though it's a bold-faced lie or something that we've picked up from somebody that didn't know what they were talking about. I think about my own internal words, my kids' internal words, the things that they struggle with. My kids are grown, they're 24, but the things that they tell themselves repeatedly are where they land. And so it's fun to watch when they recognize the successful things that they're capable of. But it's frustrating to watch when they're holding themselves back. And I am sure you have seen lots of patients do both, right? Where they said, I can get better, and they have, or they've said, oh no, I'm afraid. So, is there an exercise or something that you do to get past that block where I might have put up a wall and you're having to tear that wall down?
So first of all, this is the one exercise I give to families as a group. I tell them, watch out for each other. If you hear your child saying something negative, tell them to rephrase it. And then I tell the child, but if your parent says something negative, tell them to rephrase it. The children always like that.
Oh, yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
like if your parent says, stop yelling, that's negative. They should say, be quiet, or why don't you get along better?
Mm.
So the parent learns as well. So the families can do it together. If somebody is too afraid to get better, and that's not common actually, I've
Mm.
run into it, but most people, at least the kids, are willing to get better. Adults, different kettle of fish sometimes.
It is. It is.
Well,
Because it
because
takes
they
more
used
time to get
that.
stuck.
Let me explain why that is. So if you've been anxious your whole life and
Mhm.
you're 40 years old, and I come to you and say, hey, you can fix your anxiety. You can use positive talk. You can use calming with hypnosis. You can talk to your inner self and learn your own personal wisdom, and that'll help you get better. An adult who's been anxious for 40 years might be threatened by that.
Mhm.
Why? Because if they suddenly became calm, their whole life is structured around their anxiety. So the wife or husband may not like them anymore. The job they're in may not fit them anymore. So it's dangerous because you have to change. And so adults have a much harder time, I believe, in changing. Teenagers, they change all the time, whether they whether they want to or not. So they're more adaptive to these ideas.
That makes all the sense in the world. And I think about, so I've been an educator my entire life, and the bulk of my career has been teaching adults. And anybody who has ever taught children say, oh, I don't know that I could do what you do, because adults are difficult to teach. And it's because of what you just said, right? We have created our biases and solidified them in our minds for 30, 40, 50 years. And we've said, this is the way it is. And we're having to move the paradigm a little bit and shift it. But how powerful that one, we can, and that two, there are some systematic things we can do. I love that you work with families and not just with the kids, but you have this really cool book. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the book and what, if I were to pick it up, what would I gain from having it in my hands?
Well, first of all, the book describes many keys to life. I'm going to tell you the top 5 keys.
Okay.
The first one is sleep.
Ugh,
This is the keys to good life. Sleep is so important. When we sleep, we rest our brain, we repair our immune system, we grow if you're a teenager. And if you don't sleep, you're going to become anxious and depressed and not think well. So sleep is something that adolescents often skip because they want to be on their social media
sure.
or they want to party. And yet it's so important. And this is true throughout life. So when you're old age, sleep is important. The next key to a good life is exercise. You've heard this before, but exercise is 30 minutes of aerobic exercise every day, keeps your body and mind in good shape. And if you do it outside and in the sun, you're going to get vitamin D and your hormone levels are re-regulated by the sun, so you sleep better. The next one, as you probably know, is diet. Good, well-balanced diet. So important. And I'm excited that the government may start looking at processed foods and try to remove them from our diet because they really are harmful. And hopefully we can start addressing that and feed everyone better in this country. The next key is having a sense of purpose.
Mm,
So important, especially when you're older. If you like many people, they retire and then they pass away because they have no purpose anymore.
right.
So important to have purpose. But even as a teen, the reason purpose is helpful is it puts things in perspective. So if you have a purpose of whatever the purpose is, and you find a challenge, well, you need to overcome the challenge in order to fulfill your purpose.
Mhm.
If there's no purpose, you don't have that feeling that you need to overcome something. And then the fifth thing is a social life. Again, very, very important, both for teens, because when you have support group, teens obviously want to be supported but adults, again, older people, loneliness is a terrible problem
Mhm.
and it shortens life. So you want to make sure you have a social life. And we can talk if you wanted about how to make that happen. So that's the 5 keys of many, but this is probably the most important 5 keys. And then I teach, there's lots of tools, so over 100 tools. You can pick up one chapter and just read one tool and it can change your life as long as you follow the tool. But I think the 3 major tools that I talk about is the positive talk. We talked about that already. Learning to calm yourself with hypnosis, with imagery. And when I say imagery, it's not just imagining what you can see, but it's also what you can hear
Mm,
and smell and feel and taste. And the reason is every time you imagine a sense, it activates the part of the brain that actually senses that sense. So it's a whole brain activity.
love it.
And then I'll teach people to relax themselves. And very importantly, I teach them to pick a sign, like a gesture, like making a fist, crossing the fingers. And when they get relaxed, they tell themselves, from now on, whenever I want to relax, I can make my sign, and then I'll automatically relax even when I'm not using my imagery or my hypnosis. And that's what's called a post-hypnotic suggestion. You're programming yourself to relax. So I tell kids, practice the imagery every day, and then practice relaxing throughout the day whenever you're stressed. And kids who are anxious learn to regulate their emotions. Or if you have pain, you can regulate your pain in a similar way.
Mm,
And the third major tool is listening to yourself, to subconscious. And you could do that in various ways. One way is just to quiet your mind and listen. Ask yourself a question and listen for an answer. You could go take a walk in nature. You can even imagine a whiteboard and ask your subconscious, can you write answers for me? And many kids can say yes or no, and you can actually have conversations with your inner self.
wow. Oh, this is so fascinating. And I'm thinking about my daughter. My daughter is a kindergarten teacher. She had a day today. I mean, we all have them sometimes, but today was a day. She has one little boy that is not capable of regulating himself yet. I mean, he is only 6. However, he's lived a really difficult upbringing. And so he will start to scream. And when he screams, all the rest of the children are having to deal with this child who's screaming. And she knows that it's because he can't help it. And at the same time, it's this overstimulation of epic proportion for her. And so I just got a text from her that said, I'm doing a puzzle and then I'm walking the dog because I need complete silence. I am so overstimulated. And that's what I'm hearing you say, right? Like recognizing when you need a minute to breathe. And I love the idea of there being a sign. so that when I'm in the moment, if I make that fist or if I cross my fingers, I know what that means. It takes me back to my childhood. So I grew up in the 70s. My father was an entertainer by trade. As a matter of fact, at the beginning and the end of this podcast, you hear his music as the intro and outro. But he used to smoke 3 packs of cigarettes a day and was very hardcore. It was scary. And I was only 7 or 8 at the time. And I told him, I said, Papa, I really want you to stop smoking because I want you to walk me down the aisle. And he took it seriously. But hypnosis was how he was able to quit, was going through and learning to visualize and changing all of those things. So I know it works because he hasn't picked up a cigarette in 50 years. And there's so much power in that, right? And I'm so thrilled that you have made this accessible to people via book, but also via you so that you can get people to be healthy and whole. And that's wonderful. And I would call that productive joy, but I would love to hear your definition of productive joy. If you had to describe to me productive joy, how would you describe it?
I would say you want to be true to yourself and then manifest, I guess I would say allow the universe to manifest through you. To
Say
me,
more.
that's productive joy. Well, so I believe there's a lot more to this universe than meets the eye. And I actually talk about that in my book, about achieving a spiritual state, because it helps you deal with the challenges when you realize there's more than meets the eye. And so I think each of us has an opportunity when you live this life to really be kind to each other, to be helpful. And then we channel, I believe, the universe or God, whatever you want to call it, through ourselves and to accomplish great deeds. And to me, that's productive joy.
That is a beautiful definition. And we do need to be kinder to one another and recognize that there should be more of that. But I like the way you said that. Allow the universe to manifest through you and to be true to yourself. And I think that's maybe the missing link for a lot of us. Like I think about the people that are listening right now who are busy, right? And they're doing life and they're running through it and they're going and they're taking kids to practice and they're just in the dead run. And what I'm hearing you say is pull back, take a minute, take a breath, put yourself into that relaxed state and get in touch with all of your senses so that you aren't in that constant overload. And then you can head into that productive joy.
Right. And we talked earlier about finding a purpose. And often teens are saying, I don't know what my purpose is. And I said, that's true. You have to learn. But a purpose you can start with, even as a teenager, is to be kind to each other.
Yeah.
And that can be your first purpose.
And a powerful one. And if they carry that through life, then what a better world we'd live in, right?
That is correct. I teach kids to use loving kindness thoughts. So especially with people you don't like. Let's say you have a teacher you don't like or a boss you don't like.
Yeah.
Every day, start off a day thinking of your teacher or boss and sending loving thoughts. I hope you're healthy. I hope you're happy. I hope you're satisfied. I hope you have a great day. And that changes people's relationships. Not exactly sure how. I mean, one thing is it'll change your attitude towards them. And maybe they pick up nonverbal cues that change the relationship. Or I actually believe you can affect other people's behavior through thoughts. So if you believe that, that's like the power of prayer, then you do have that ability as well. So loving kindness thoughts is part of kindness.
Yeah. No, it definitely is. And none of this costs anything, right? Like I'm thinking about this and I think we sometimes think, well, I can't because fill in the blank. I can't afford it. I don't have time. I can't this, that, or the other. But everything you're saying is something I could do standing right where I am right now, and it would change everything. How wonderful and powerful. I'm so glad that you're a writer and I'm so glad that you're going to keep writing. What's next? You have this book out now, but you said that you're currently working on the next project. What's that?
Well, the project is tentatively called Interviews with the Subconscious. So I've talked to subconscious for the last 25 years, and I've heard amazing tales that I've left out of my books thus far because they're kind of hard to believe. And people have a hard enough time accepting hypnosis and that they have this inner power to understand this power can extend beyond. So I've had patients who've talked to demons and angels and God and had past lives. They tell you these things. It just comes up. I didn't necessarily believe in any of that stuff, but the way I approach patients is I accept what they say. I don't argue with them. I don't say that's not real. I just go there. And like a lot of these make sense. In my first book, I actually described a ghost story.
Hmm.
If I may tell it briefly. So this 12-year-old girl had a ghost come to her every night telling her to kill herself.
Oh my goodness.
And twice she tried to commit suicide. And when I met her, I said I would like to speak to the ghost. I, I couldn't see the ghost, but she could. And I asked the ghost, is it true you want the girl to kill herself? She said, yes. I said, why? Well, the girl has had a horrible childhood. I want her to be able to relive it.
Oh,
That kind of made logical sense. I said, well, I'm helping the girl cope with her horrible childhood. And when she dies of old age, not if, but when, she can relive her childhood if she wants to. And the ghost said, okay, that works for me. I would like to become her guardian angel. And I asked the girl, is it okay if the ghost becomes your guardian angel? She says, yes, as long as I don't have to see her anymore because she scares me. I
oh
said to the ghost,
wow.
is it okay if you're not seen? She said, yes. I told the ghost, say goodbye to the ghost. And that was the end of the ghost. This ghost was coming every night, stopped coming after 6 months. We took her off of all the antipsychotic, all the medicines they had on her to try to stop the ghost from coming. That's what's in the book. Now I'm going to tell you the part that wasn't in the book that might be in my third book. So after this session, I did not know what's going to happen next. They don't teach you about ghosts in medical school or
I am going to
hypnology.
guess that was not part of your training. Yeah.
No, but I just went when she took me. So with the girl's permission, we told her mother what happened. I wanted her mother to know because I wasn't sure what's going to happen next. This girl has tried to commit suicide a couple of times already.
And
So
she
we
was
tell the
12.
mother, right.
Wow.
So we tell the mother, and the mother says, what did the ghost look like? And the girl says, she looked like a 3-year-old girl in a white dress. And the mother said, oh, that's what I've been seeing around the house some mornings.
Wow. Wow.
I have lots of stories like these, and I'm going to share some of them in my third book.
Well, then we're all going to need to get your third book because this is
Yes.
real life paranormal experiences. Well, and here's what I think is special about you, Dr. Anbar, is you're just real, right? And you are just trying to help people. And sometimes that requires us getting out of our own way of our prejudices, our biases, our things that we think are the way that they are, and instead just opening our minds to what's happening here, right? Like how can I help this little girl right now? My job right now is to help this little girl. What do I do? That's a beautiful gift that I'm not sure everyone has, but it just goes to show that you're exactly where you're supposed to be.
Well, they have it. They just don't use it. We can all
Cool.
accept each other. And I really wish in the political world we would accept each other. People are saying both sides, no, you're wrong. You're evil. It's so wrong. We're all good. Virtually everyone is good. You have to listen to each other and
Well,
find out
and
what we think.
maybe that's the nugget of wisdom for today is as humans, we should love each other as humans. And
Yes.
where that goes and what that means is up to each individual. But you have dropped some beautiful nuggets of wisdom for us. And that's what productive joy is all about, is an opportunity to experience a little bit of B12, a little bit of light and life. And you've done exactly that today. So thank you for your time. How would somebody find you? We haven't even said the name of your book, so we need to do that for sure. And then how would somebody find you?
So the name of the book is The Life Guide for Teens. But as we discussed, most of the lessons are applicable to adults as well. So I encourage you to pick it up. There's sections for parents in each chapter, like helping your teen deal with particular problems. So I think it covers a lot of topics. And my previous book, I think I did mention Changing Children's Lives with Hypnosis. Both of them are available at dranbar.com, D-R-A, N as in Nancy, B as in boy, A-R.com.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you. And I do have some rapid fire questions for you. Would you be willing to answer those for me?
Of course.
Okay, question number 1. What is your definition of fun?
Of fun. Letting the universal energy go through you.
I love it. Just flows right through. Okay, next question. How do you know that you are showing up as your authentic self?
Listen to yourself and ask yourself, am I being authentic? So take a moment to think about it.
Yeah. And we don't do that enough, do we? Okay. As adults, as kids, we just don't do that often enough. How do you channel your best self on your worst days?
Well, again, you need to stop and think. You might think about a situation where you did well and bringing that energy into the worst day. As a doctor, I work with some really sick patients who even died. Very sad. But I was able to get through it because I knew, well, I have this perspective of death that it's not the end, but I've had a lot of good days and I could bring that in to help me get through the bad days.
And we have to, right? Especially in a profession like yours where you're dealing with children who aren't healthy. That's hard. That's just hard. Okay, last question, and this is going to be tough because you've said some brilliant things. If we know by nature people can only remember one major thing from a 30-minute experience. And so if people can only remember one of the things that you said, what's the one takeaway you really want people to have?
Remember that you have the power within you to overcome most every challenge. And if you have trouble overcoming a challenge, ask for help. Nothing wrong with that. There's always people around to help. So you can overcome challenges.
Yes, we can. Yes, we can. So, Productive Joy friends, thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. Dr. Anbar, thank you for sharing your wisdom. This was exceptional because these were practical things that we could all do right away. And you guys know that my goal for you is that you get a little shot of B12, that you get a nugget or two of wisdom that you can use right away, and that you figure out a way to turn fun into action.